Ever felt that familiar surge of frustration on a customer service call? Or maybe you've been the one taking those calls, kind of silently bracing for the next demanding voice.
Oh, absolutely. We've all navigated those everyday pressures in the workplace, haven't we?
Exactly. But what happens when that stress and frustration, boils over, when it escalates into something genuinely abusive, threatening, or even violent? It's a reality far more common and complex than many of us realize. That's precisely where we're heading today on the deep dive. We're going to unpack work-related violence, a critical and I think often misunderstood workplace hazard.
Yeah.
When you hear that term, you might conjure up certain images.
Right.
But our sources reveal it's actually far broader, maybe more insidious than simple physical altercations.
That's a good way to put it. Insidious.
Our mission for you, the listener, is to provide a really nuanced understanding of this issue. We'll go beyond the obvious physical stuff, delve into the profound psychological impacts, and crucially, arm you with practical frameworks for how to assess and control these risks. It's about being informed and empowered, quickly getting well-versed in a topic that touches every single workplace.
And to give us that solid foundation, our deep dive today draws from some really comprehensive guides on work-related violence. These include precise, authoritative definitions from respected bodies like the UK Health and Safety Executive, that's the HSE, and the International Labour Organization, the ILO.
Well,
They really help us understand not just what this phenomenon is, but, how it affects people and what proactive steps can genuinely be taken to mitigate it.
okay, let's unpack this then. When we hear violence at work, I think, like I said, many of us immediately picture something physical, a punch, a shove, maybe a mugging.
Yeah, the dramatic stuff.
It's the kind of image that often dominates headlines. But our sources suggest we might be missing a much larger, maybe quieter threat.
That's right. What's truly eye-opening here is how expansively organizations like the UK HSE define this. It really does go way beyond just physical assault.
How so?
Well, the HSE, for example, defines work-related violence as, and I'm quoting here, any incident in which a person is abused, threatened, or assaulted in circumstances relating to their work.
Abused, threatened, or assaulted.
Exactly. Notice those powerful words, abused and threatened. They significantly broaden the scope of what we might typically consider violent. It's not just the physical act.
So it's not just about what physically happens to your body, but the verbal and psychological attacks that can really chip away at you.
Precisely. And how do other significant bodies like the ILO add to this? Well, the ILO absolutely builds upon that foundation.
Yeah.
Their code of practice defines workplace violence as any action, incident, or behavior that departs from reasonable conduct and where a person is assaulted, threatened, harmed, injured in the course of, or as a direct result of, his or her work.
Harmed or injured, again, broader.
Right. But then a really crucial ILO training manual goes a significant step further. It states that violence includes incidents where employees are abused, threatened, assaulted, or subject to other offensive acts or behaviors. And this is key. It explicitly includes both physical and psychological violence.
Wow. Okay, so psychological violence, too. What does that actually look like in practice?
So we're talking about everything from verbal insults to bullying, mobbing, which is basically organized group bullying, and even harassment, whether that's sexual or racial.
That feels like a huge shift from what most people might initially consider violence.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're saying a rude comment, if it's persistent, could be seen as a form of violence.
It potentially could, yes.
Is this just, playing with words, or does this broader definition have real-world implications for how organizations should respond?
Oh, it's absolutely not just semantics. While these definitions aren't necessarily statutory laws, which gives organizations some flexibility in, how they tailor their own policies, that flexibility comes with a very serious responsibility.
Right.
It empowers them, maybe even obliges them, to create more comprehensive and effective guidelines that protect their employees from a far wider range of harms.
Okay, that makes sense. To make this really tangible, let's look at some examples from the sources. We've got the clear-cut cases, obviously. A member of the public hits a shop assistant during a, customer query.
Yep, clear assault.
Or a security guard is threatened with a gun during a robbery. But then it spans, right? It includes a social services worker being verbally threatened during a home visit.
Or a train driver being spat at. Horrible.
Yeah, awful. And yes, even, as you mentioned, a call center operative being verbally abused during a credit control call. All of these, remarkably, fit these definitions of work-related violence.
And that last example particularly highlights the psychological aspect, doesn't it? It's not physical, but it's abuse.
Definitely.
And when we narrow in on harassment specifically, the European Social Partner Agreement provides a clear definition. It occurs when someone is repeatedly and deliberately abused, threatened, and humiliated in circumstances relating to work.
Repeatedly and deliberately. Those are the key words there.
Critical here, yes. It's that pattern, that intent.
And this kind of harassment can show up in so many different ways, can it?
Absolutely correct. It can be physical, psychological, or sexual. It could be a one-off, really egregious incident, or it could be a systematic, ongoing pattern of behavior.
Right.
It can happen between coworkers or, as we've highlighted, between workers and third parties like clients or customers. And its severity, well, it ranges from minor disrespect all the way up to actual criminal offenses.
So what's the practical takeaway here for you listening? It means that rude comment, that persistent put down, or even a subtle threat at work. It can be just as much a form of violence as a physical shove.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact, as we'll now see, can be equally, if not sometimes more, devastating.
Yes, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of these incidents, especially the non-physical ones, is often profoundly underestimated. It's easy to focus on the visible. So while we absolutely acknowledge the obvious physical injuries, from fatal wounds in the worst cases, down to bruising, which is actually the most commonly reported physical injury,
Okay.
it's crucial to understand that the vast majority of these reported incidents don't actually involve physical assault at all.
Which means a huge part of the problem goes largely unaddressed if we're only looking for, cuts and bruises.
Precisely.
But here's the truly insidious part, the one that often blindsides both victims and maybe their organizations. The psychological effects are frequently the most serious, silent, and long-lasting.
You're absolutely right. A violent incident, whether it's physical or verbal, can be deeply traumatic. It can lead to acute traumatic stress, and in some cases, even post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Right.
It can also trigger or significantly worsen existing mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. Now, you might hear someone say, oh, they just need to be more thick-skinned, or it's part of the job.
Yeah, that old chestnut.
But it's vital, truly vital, to emphasize that employers should never adopt this attitude. Beyond the fundamental human right to a safe workplace, there's a significant ethical and often a legal duty of care. Ignoring the cumulative effect of, say, verbal abuse, even on seemingly thick-skinned individuals, can lead to chronic stress, burnout, and ultimately a breakdown of trust. That impacts productivity and incurs huge hidden costs for the organization.
That really underscores how the problem isn't the victim's resilience, but the environment itself, the behavior they're subjected to. So for those who do experience this, what are some of those typical, deeply challenging reactions we see?
They can be quite profound and debilitating. We commonly observe withdrawal from social interactions, hypervigilance, that constant state of being on edge, always scanning for danger,
Exhausted.
significant loss of confidence and self-esteem, pronounced mood swings, and even the breakdown of both working and personal relationships. Anxiety and depression are common, and in the most severe cases, it can tragically lead to suicide attempts.
God, that's heavy.
It is, and what's also incredibly important here is its contribution to chronic work-related stress. It's not just the trauma of a single incident, though that's bad enough.
Right.
It's the constant feeling of being at risk and vulnerable that significantly increases chronic stress, making you anxious and vigilant day in, day out. It's that perpetual dread of what could happen that truly takes a severe toll on mental well-being, not just what has already transpired.
Wow. Okay, let's pivot then to understanding who is most at risk and crucially why. Because knowing this isn't just academic, is it? It's the absolutely essential first step to effective prevention.
It really is.
It's not just random. There are clear, identifiable patterns.
Exactly. This raises an important question. What patterns can we identify, not just from the job roles themselves, but also the specific circumstances surrounding these incidents? Our sources confirm that the single biggest risk factor for work-related violence is the very nature of the job specifically, roles that require frequent interaction with the public.
So if you're out there, frontline, interacting with people directly, you're inherently at higher risk. Is it just that public-facing aspect, or are there specific types of interactions that elevate that risk even more?
Precisely. It's definitely about the interaction type. We see consistently high risk in roles involving giving a service, like a social services worker or retail staff,
Okay.
caring professions such as nurses, doctors, care assistants, Education with teachers and support staff, handling cash transactions, think bus drivers or bank tellers,
Right.
delivery and collection roles like postal workers or lorry drivers, those in controlling positions such as event stewards, and anyone representing authority like police or traffic wardens, enforcement officers.
That covers a lot of ground.
It does. Now, there are always exceptions, of course, like staff in the prison service or psychiatric hospitals, where the public isn't a primary factor, but the inherent risk of violence is still incredibly high due to the nature of their clientele.
And working alone, that must significantly compound that risk, doesn't it? I imagine being isolated can make an already tense situation much, much worse.
It absolutely does. Lone working is another very significant risk factor. Think about a social worker doing a home visit in an unfamiliar neighborhood, or a service engineer working late in a client's building, or even a night shift security guard patrolling a quiet facility. They're inherently more vulnerable without a colleague present.
Yeah.
And on the topic of home visits, the reason for the visit matters profoundly. An enforcement officer following up on, say, a noise complaint faces a much higher risk of violence than perhaps a satellite TV installation engineer, even though both are entering a private home.
That really brings home the nuance in risk assessment. It's not just where, but why you're there. What about demographics, age or gender? Do they play a big independent role in who's more likely to be a victim?
Well, interestingly, sex and age seem to have relatively minor independent correlation to the risk of violence. Usually, any correlations we observe are linked more to the prevalence of certain demographics in specific job roles that carry higher risk.
Ah, okay. So it's tied to the job function mostly.
Mostly, yes. For instance, in many sectors that involve public interaction, men are statistically more frequently victims of violence than women, which can be a bit counterintuitive for some, given common perceptions.
Huh. That is interesting. And what about the assailants themselves? Is there a typical profile, or is that another stereotype we should probably, discard?
That's definitely a stereotype to discard. The majority of incidents actually involve assailants who are strangers to the victim. If they are known, it's almost always through work-related interactions.
But,
And as you might expect, the typical assailant varies greatly by sector. For example, a nurse in an emergency department might be assaulted by, say, a drunk male, but equally, a care assistant in a nursing home might face aggression from a sober, elderly female patient experiencing distress or perhaps dementia.
right, different contexts, different triggers.
Exactly. What's more consistent, however, are the circumstantial risk factors. So, incidents are more likely when the assailant is under the influence of drink or drugs, maybe in pain or distress, under significant personal stress, perhaps being forced or coerced into a situation they resent,
Hmm.
or when they are committing another crime like theft or sexual assault, or indeed has a significant mental health condition that's not being managed.
So often there's a kind of brewing storm or clear indicators before an incident kicks off, rather than something coming completely out of the blue.
In many instances, yes, violent incidents don't occur without some warning or a visible buildup of tension. There are often telltale verbal cues or body language signs that things are escalating.
Okay.
However, it's really important to acknowledge that some premeditated incidents, particularly those involving theft or sexual assault, may have no discernible warning signs at all, as the assailant intentionally conceals their intentions right up until the point of attack.
Right. So vigilance is key, but not foolproof.
Yeah.
Okay. Knowing the risks, understanding who's vulnerable and why. That's one thing. What do we do about it? The sources lay out a really practical, systematic approach, don't they? A proactive way to tackle this challenge head on, rather than just reacting after something happens.
Yes, exactly. This brings us to a structured action plan, a powerful four-stage process for both the assessment and control of work-related violence, as clearly outlined by the UK HSE. It's fundamentally a cyclical process designed for continuous improvement.
A cycle. Okay, so what's the foundational first stage? Where do you start?
Stage one is pretty straightforward. Find out if there is a problem. This isn't about assuming. It involves active, systematic investigation.
How do you do that?
Well, this might include formal or informal staff surveys, which can be targeted at specific at-risk groups, or by implementing really robust incident reporting systems, or maybe adapting existing ones to capture more useful detail.
What kind of detail?
The key is to collect adequate, qualitative data. What type of incident occurred? Was it physical, verbal, harassment? Specific details about what happened before and during the event, information about the assailant if possible and the victim, and crucially the outcome, whether it's a physical injury, emotional shock, or, longer-term chronic stress.
Okay, so gather the facts first. Once you establish you do have a problem, you've got the data, what's the next step in the cycle?
Stage 2 is to decide what action to take. This involves applying the core steps of any sound risk assessment process.
Which are?
Identifying precisely who might be harmed and exactly how, assessing if the existing arrangements for safety are actually adequate, developing the necessary preventive and protective measures, which we'll talk more about in a sec, recording those significant findings clearly, and committing to regularly reviewing that assessment to ensure it stays relevant. Things change.
Right, makes sense. And then you can't just leave it on paper. You have to actually make those changes happen.
Absolutely. That's stage 3. Take action. This means actively involving workers in the entire process. Their input is invaluable. It means embedding the chosen measures and policies into the organization's overarching health and safety framework, making it part of the culture. And crucially, fostering that culture of cooperation.
What does that look like?
Staff need to be fully aware of the policies and procedures, be encouraged to follow them meticulously, and feel genuinely supported in reporting any further incidents without fear of reprisal or being dismissed.
Okay, and finally, you can't just implement something and then forget about it, right?
Right.
It needs to be a living system, adapting.
Exactly. Stage 4 is check what you have done. This is where you systematically review the effectiveness of your implemented controls. Are they working?
How do you check?
Well, through regular management oversight, perhaps safety audits, or via your health and safety committee if you have one. It's about ensuring the controls are actually working as intended in the real world and adapting them if they're not, closing the loop.
So diving into those control measures you mentioned, the sources break them down really clearly. Let's start with organizational controls. These sound like the big picture policy level changes.
They are indeed. These are measures implemented at a strategic, systemic level. They include things like clear, uncompromising, zero-tolerance policies towards violence from anyone, customers, clients, even other staff.
And making that visible?
Yes, broadcast through visible signs, notices, internal communications. It also means committing, where appropriate, to prosecuting offenders who commit criminal assault. Organizations can proactively reduce face-to-face contact sometimes, for instance, with automatic ticket dispensers, self-service kiosks, or cash-free payment systems to make robbery less likely or tempting.
Smart.
Vetting clients where records exist can help identify risks beforehand. Scheduling community workers with regular check-ins, developing robust emergency procedures with alarms or maybe code words, and prohibiting lone working in clearly high-risk scenarios are also vital organizational controls.
And after an incident?
And definitely post-incident support, including comprehensive counseling and perhaps critical incident debriefing, is crucial for helping victims recover.
Okay, some might view prosecuting a customer for, say, a verbal insult as overly harsh or maybe an extreme measure. What's the practical and strategic thinking behind such a strong zero-tolerance stance? Is it just about punishment or something more?
That's an excellent question, and it's definitely about something more profound than just punishment, although accountability matters. The strategic thinking is multi-layered.
How so?
Firstly, it sends an unequivocal message to all employees that their safety and well-being are genuinely paramount. That fosters trust and shows real commitment from leadership. It's not just lip service.
Right.
Secondly, it sets clear boundaries with external parties. It demonstrates that abusive behavior simply will not be tolerated, which acts as a powerful deterrent over time. And thirdly, from a legal and ethical standpoint, employers have that duty of care we mentioned. Taking a firm stand, including prosecution where appropriate and necessary, helps fulfill that duty and contributes to building a safer, more respectful organizational culture overall. It also helps reduce the long-term hidden costs of unaddressed violence, like turnover, absenteeism, low morale.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so beyond policy, there are tangible physical changes organizations can make to the environment itself.
Indeed, these are physical controls. Think about redesigning public waiting areas, maybe with better seating, adequate lighting, and clear, regular information updates to reduce tension and frustration from long waits.
Little things can make a difference.
They can. Counters can be redesigned, maybe increase their width or height for staff protection, creating more of a physical barrier. Securing loose objects is important too, prevents them from being used as improvised weapons.
And technology.
Technology plays a huge role here. Panic buttons, personal alarms, mobile phones perhaps with GPS tracking, and real-time audio transmission for rapid assistance are becoming much more standard. And then you have more advanced security measures like surveillance cameras, CCTV, protective screens, coded doors, and employing dedicated security staff. These are key, especially in higher risk environments.
So it's about redesigning the space and using tech to create a safer zone. But what about the individual? What role do staff themselves play in managing these risks day to day?
That brings us neatly to behavioral controls. And this is critical. It's absolutely crucial that staff actively utilize all the existing organizational and physical controls put in place.
They have to use the tools they're given.
Exactly. If there are security doors, they must be kept closed and secure. If there are lone worker check-in procedures, they must be followed diligently every time. Beyond that, there are specific behaviors that can make a significant difference.
Like what?
This includes things like quick, courteous, and non-confrontational handling of complaints or issues, demonstrating assertive authority without becoming aggressive yourself, learning to read verbal and body language clues for escalating tension, and using proven diffusion techniques to de-escalate situations before they boil over.
Okay.
In some extreme high-risk roles, specific self-defense or physical restraint techniques might be necessary, but only provided staff are adequately and professionally trained. That's a big caveat.
And even simple, maybe seemingly minor, everyday actions can contribute to personal safety, which is maybe often overlooked.
Absolutely. The sources list things like wearing non-grabbable clothing, nothing loose that can be easily grabbed, avoiding overly flamboyant attire that might draw unwanted attention in certain contexts, not conducting home visits at night unless absolutely necessary and with proper precautions, concealing your ID badge when out in the community maybe, parking your vehicle strategically for a quick getaway if needed, and wisely, not accepting food or drink during home visits just as a precaution.
These are small actions, but collectively, they sound like they could significantly reduce personal vulnerability.
Yeah, it really can add up.
This all sounds like it requires significant ongoing training, though, both for management to implement this stuff and for every staff member who might encounter these situations.
It absolutely does. Staff training is the cornerstone of any robust and effective control strategy. It's non-negotiable, really.
What should that training cover?
Well, it includes general awareness training, just understanding the causes and manifestations of violence, the general risk reduction measures available, and how to report incidents properly. Then there's specific training on the safe systems of work relevant to their role, like those lone worker procedures or client vetting protocols.
And the personal skills.
Yes, personal behavior training focusing on recognizing the signs of aggression and using those diffusion techniques effectively. And where appropriate, as mentioned, self-defense training, which crucially includes understanding the legal parameters of using reasonable force. You can't just lash out.
Right, absolutely. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means there's a systematic, multi-layered way to tackle work-related violence. It's not just about reacting after the fact. From organizational policy all the way down to the physical layout of a room, even to how you carry yourself and interact, it all plays a critical part in building and maintaining a safer work environment for everyone.
That's the goal.
We've covered a substantial amount today. This deep dive into work-related violence has really shown us that it's far more expansive and impactful than just, physical assault.
Yeah.
We've explored the broad and crucial definitions from the UK HSE and ILO,
The abuse and threats.
revealing that abuse, threats, and various forms of psychological harm like bullying and harassment are just as much a part of this critical issue. We've acknowledged the often underestimated yet deeply serious psychological effects, from PTSD to chronic work-related stress, and how that feeling of vulnerability can be as damaging as an actual incident.
Yeah, that constant vigilance.
We've also identified key risk factors, primarily the nature of the job itself, especially those involving public interaction, lone working, and home visits, and looked at the typical circumstances surrounding assailants.
And perhaps most importantly, we've laid out that practical 4-stage framework for assessing and controlling risk. Finding out if there's a problem, deciding what action to take, taking that action, and then checking what you've done. It's a cycle.
Yep.
This is all supported by that comprehensive range of organizational, physical, and behavioral control measures, underpinned, of course, by that essential ongoing staff training.
Absolutely.
Our goal today was really to empower you with a comprehensive, nuanced understanding to help you quickly become well-informed on a topic that truly impacts everyone in the workplace, and critically, how you might start to approach it systematically.
So for you, consider this. Think about a time you felt uncomfortable or maybe subtly threatened at work. Perhaps a persistent rude customer, an aggressive phone call, or maybe a colleague's undermining comments. How might this broader understanding of violence and the structured approach to assessment and control change how you now view that experience? Or perhaps how you might advocate for a safer, more supportive environment for yourself and your colleagues going forward?